I really think the age of big AI, of the large language models, the age of big data being required to train those models, the age of huge GPU farms, this is all just a stepping stone. We're going to get to AI that can be trained from sparse example on a Raspberry Pi in 5 to 10 years. And I don't think our systems are ready for that. But if you want to be part of that, you really need to read the papers. You really need to be studying. You need to have good grasp of your mathematics, and you need to be able to actually do the work in AI and not just say use ChatGPT and be a prompt engineer.
Hey everyone, welcome to AI Trends with Ash. This is Ash Bala, your host. Join me in this series as I chat with industry experts, thought leaders, and professionals to gain insights on how AI or artificial intelligence is shaping the future of work. Whether you're a high schooler curious about AI in any industry, or a working professional looking to gain more knowledge, this series has something for you. If you are curious about the fascinating world of robotics and AI, you are in for a treat. In today's episode, I am super thrilled to introduce Peter Haas, a multi-talented visionary in the realms of robotics, AI, and humanitarian innovation. As CEO of Avendly, a trailblazing robotics firm specializing in restaurants and bar solutions, his career includes the role of Associate Director at Brown University's Humanity-Centered Robotics Initiative, where he significantly contributed to research spanning automation-induced jobs displacement, AR, VR, MR interfaces for robots. He also worked on social robotics for the elderly. Alongside academia, Mr. Haas led IDC's computer vision practice as research director in computer vision AI software. He co-founded ExactSense, specializing in LiDAR mapping and autonomous navigation. As founder and COO of AIDG, Mr. Haas made a social impact accelerating small hardware enterprises in Haiti and Guatemala. This involved design for extreme affordability and seed funding for local entrepreneurs. Notably, AIDG nurtured Kingo Energy, providing solar systems to over 5 million people in Central America. Mr. Haas's global influence extends to speaking engagements at prestigious events like TED Global, the World Bank, and Harvard University. His talks span AI robotics, design, and affordability, disaster response, and international development. With a BA in philosophy from Yale University, Mr. Haas embodies a holistic approach, merging innovation with ethics and social impact. I'm super thrilled to have him join on our podcast today to share his valuable insights and rich experiences. Without further ado, Peter Haas, welcome to the show. Oh, I think you're muted.
Thank you, Ash. I'm looking forward to this conversation. And someday when we solve artificial intelligence, we'll solve audiovisual communication. And I won't be on mute.
No problem. Okay, great. So let's just dive into the questions. You've been a diverse career spanning robotics, AI, humanitarian work, and public speaking. How did your journey lead to this intersection of these fields, and what keeps you passionate about them?
So I started in college doing software development work on a NASA satellite project called Gravity Probe B. And that really got me interested in this intersection between hardware and software. And after doing software for a few years out of college, I spent a lot of time traveling. I made enough money to travel one way around the world and volunteer for nonprofits. And I realized that there was a need for a lot of this sort of IoT hardware and infrastructure improvement in these countries I was visiting, but that you needed to have local entrepreneurs take ownership of the projects. I kept on seeing projects that were done by Engineers Without Borders or other well-intentioned groups that would go down and install something and it would break down after 6 months. I realized to fix that problem, you needed people who were there, who were skilled, and you needed to start developing the skill sets of people in kind of basic infrastructure, electronics, hardware and software integration, IoT. And so I started this small accelerator for companies doing infrastructure work. And that was fantastic for several years. We started several companies, including Kitsol, which became Kingo Energy. And we help them do things like develop custom hydroelectric load controllers, develop solar systems that you could top up with your cell phone, and did a lot of design for extreme affordability work there. After a few years of that, we were in a situation where in Haiti there was a major disaster. So in 2010, a major earthquake struck Port-au-Prince, and that presented a lot of challenges to continuing with doing the business of helping these small businesses grow and helping do basic infrastructure. And the scale of the challenges was overwhelming in that disaster. And it made me really want to step back from international development after that and rethink how I could make more scalable change. And I realized that marrying my interests in software and hardware and going back into tech was a good way to have a strong impact on people. So I went to drones because I really felt that drones could play a huge role in disaster response. And we saw this in the Nepal earthquake when the humanitarian guidelines were written for UAV response. And basically, you had the first massive use of UAVs in surveying damage after an earthquake. And just to give an example of why that's important, after the Haiti earthquake, we inspected buildings. We brought down engineers from the U.S. to do building inspections to determine whether buildings were safe to go back into. And that process, which was a UN-led process, took about 5.5 months because there were 88,000 buildings to inspect. I believe that in the future, we're going to reach a point with UAVs and drones where that process is going to take less than a week, maybe a couple days. And that is going to fundamentally change how fast people can get back into their homes and how fast people can get out of IDP camps or internally displaced person camps. So that's just kind of one of the examples of the potential promise of robotics. But after that, I went to research and worked at Brown for a few years doing the Humanity-Centered Robotics Initiative, which was a fantastic cross-disciplinary initiative. Did computer vision after that, started my own robotics company, and I'm actually in a transition now where I'm going to be helping build out one of the major U.S. robotics ecosystems, and I'm going to be really fundamentally changing the future of workforce development in one state to try to help grow the number of people going into robotics and really change the number of companies being started in robotics and really try to build economic development through robotics, because I think that robotics holds the future for economic development as AI and robotics both grow as sectors. And I'd be happy to talk a little bit more about why I think that, and why I think that AI is going to play such a big role in the acceleration of robotics a little bit later. But that's the basic overview of my career path.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's always interesting to hear about people's passions and how they got to where they are right now. So thank you for that insight. My next question is, in your work on social robotics for the elderly, what are some of the most exciting developments you've witnessed in enhancing the quality of the life of older individuals through technology?
So we're entering a really interesting phase right now, demographically, where there are going to be a lot more old, elderly people than there have been in previous generations. So people are living longer, and the boomer generation is a much larger generation than the silent generation was. So the silent generation is the generation preceding the boomers, and which is a terrible name for a generation. I feel very lucky that I'm in Gen X. At least we have a cool name. But the boomer generation retiring is going to create a fundamental shift in workforce. And it's going to open up a lot of jobs for Gen Z. And there are going to be a lot of help wanted signs across the country. And you're going to be seeing a situation similar to what they have in Japan, where people are going to work longer, but people in physical jobs are not going to be able to continue doing those jobs. So people in the trades, carpentry, plumbing, electricians, and it's going to be harder and harder to find people to do those jobs. And those jobs are not going to be as easy to automate as some other jobs will be with robotics. So like warehouse jobs, for instance, pick and place. So you're going to see a lot of people moving into those jobs, and then you're going to see a lot of caregiving jobs to deal with the fact that there are going to be a lot of people who are later in life who are likely going to be living in more independent situations than they have in prior generations. So you're going to see a need for automation and robotics in the healthcare system, in caregiving jobs, and in jobs that really require a lot of time and attention, but are very taxing on the caregiver. So just to give you an example, we talked to a lot of caregivers who dealt with patients with dementia. And one of the very frustrating parts for the caregivers was that people who are dealing with dementia and people who are dealing with Alzheimer's often repeat the same patterns again and again and again. And it becomes very taxing on the caregiver to have to deal with this repetition. You need a lot of patience and you need a lot of compassion to be able to fill that role. And even with that, it becomes an exhausting process. We found that robots, specifically the Joy for All robotic cats, were very good in holding people's attention in these situations and keeping situations like I had a friend whose mother before before she had seriously needed care that required her to go into a nursing home, was living on her own, and the caregiver wasn't able to keep track of her, and she left the house, and they had to go on a search to find her, and like stopping situations like that. I think there's a lot of opportunity for robotics and IoT to be able to help keep track of where people are, help keep them occupied, and help them have a comfortable, happy day, even if they're suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's. So that's just one example of what we did. Now, in the future, you're going to see development of more humanoid robots. I was just at the factory announcement for the Agility Robotics digit, and they plan to make 10,000 digits a year. And digit right now is a warehouse robot. Digits meant to move packages and boxes and that kind of stuff. But I'd say we're probably about 10 years out from home care robots that are humanoid. So we're maybe 10 years out from robots that will make people's beds or robots that will clean up the room. So I think that these types of robotics advances will help us deal with this growing older generation, at the same time as we deal with kind of the overall workforce transition that's going to take place between boomers retiring and between automation coming into certain jobs.
Perfect. Yeah, that was really well said. So thank you for that insight. My next question is, your experience includes research on moral norms in AI. Could you share some insights into the ethical considerations and challenges in developing AI systems with a strong moral compass?
Yeah, I mean, this is a serious issue. We are deploying systems now that really have no context and no morality built into them. And it's a little bit scary for me to see these systems just be mass deployed, because I know how limited the systems are in their capability to adjust for situational awareness. And so just to give an example of some of the types of moral norm research that's taking place in the world, MIT did a project called the Moral Machine, that was meant to gauge people's responses to different situations of what self-driving cars should do in the case of life-threatening accidents. Should the self-driving car, if it can't avoid it, end up killing somebody who is young or old, a baby, a pregnant person, a worker, a doctor? Like, these types of decisions are really ingrained in our moral compass. And oftentimes we follow behavioral norms that we can't even express, that codify some of these decisions. And the interesting thing about the MIT moral machine experiment is that it showed that a lot of these decisions are regionally focused in their morality. So different regions had different moral answers about whether the self-driving car should sacrifice somebody who is elderly versus somebody who is young. Okay, just as an example. And being able to understand those regional differences and those also more universal moral norms is going to be very important as we develop robots with more human-like capabilities. The other thing I just wanted to bring into this is that we have to be very careful in how we design the UX for the robot or the automated system, because the UX can pose moral hazard. There's a great toy dinosaur called the Pleo, which was a great little robotic dinosaur. And if you held the Pleo upside down, it would make a sad noise, like it was a sad dinosaur. And the designer's intent in this was to get people to turn the Pleo back right side up. And that is the moral path for dealing with the Pleo. The result was that instead of doing that, people went onto YouTube and they made torture videos where they beat up the Pleo dinosaur to make it make this noise. And I think understanding that there are bad actors in humanity is going to be very, very important for us in developing moral robots. And we're getting to a point with AI where pretty soon we're not going to need very large data sets to train AI, where we're going to be able to do something called learning from sparse example. And when we get to that point, we're going to have to be very careful with how we train the AI to consider which examples are morally just and which examples are amoral. So yeah, it's just a little bit of the tip of the iceberg of the moral conundrum that's facing us with AI and robotics. But yeah, it's a really exciting area.
It really is. And thank you for saying that, because morals are a very important factor of AI. Now that it's developing, more people are getting to play with AI and do their own things with it, which is amazing. But it's also important, like you said, the Pleo example, that we don't abuse AI and that there should be certain limits. So that's interesting to think about. My next question is, design for extreme affordability is one of your unique focuses. Can you provide an example of a project where you've successfully applied this principle to create innovative solutions?
Yeah, sure. So this goes back more to my humanitarian days than my robotics days. But we did a project with MIT D Lab, where D Lab had made a charcoal press, and the charcoal press was for taking sugarcane bagasse and turning into char dust and then pressing that char dust with a binder into briquettes that could be used as cooking fuel. And this is to stop deforestation, because deforestation is a significant problem in Haiti, and the biggest driver of deforestation is charcoal use. So we took this charcoal press, which MIT had done, that cost about $70. And we redesigned it using locally available materials. And that got the cost down to $20, which was a good reduction in cost. But then we took it out to people and we showed it to people, and they felt it was still too expensive. I mean, this is for populations that are making $2 a day, $1 a day. So $20 was actually still way too expensive. So what we did is we redesigned the press to cut out 90% of the material. And in dropping the 90% of the material, in making it smaller and more compact, in rethinking the process of how the press operated. So instead of it being a self-contained stand that you press the charcoal onto a piece of steel, you use a small, in the redesigned press, you used a small bit of wood on the ground to press the charcoal into. And that process got down to $2 for the press. And that made it within the realm of affordability for people to actually be able to use these presses and get these presses. So I think that design for extreme affordability is really important. When I worked at ExactSense, we had the opposite issue. We were using LiDAR back when LiDAR cost about $60,000 a LiDAR. The LiDAR was one, expensive, and two, is very heavy, and three, is very fragile. So we had to build very large small UASs at the extreme of what the FAA would allow to be able to carry those LiDARs. And that ended up being a UAS that was nearly $100,000 with the LiDAR. And that whole capability of getting these colorized point clouds of buildings at high resolution and high accuracy is now possible with photogrammetry, with cameras, with a small UAS that costs $2,000 and fits in the palm of your hand. Okay, so that's just an example of what can happen in the court, and that was the span of 5 years that the technology changed that dramatically. So I think that the moral of design for extreme affordability is to really think about what you can do that's outside of the box of what's currently done now that can drop the price tenfold. And if you can do that, what can you do to make it smaller, lighter, more affordable, to pull it even further down in price? I took a lot of those principles into our robotics for the restaurants and bars, and we built a unit that's significantly more affordable than our competitors' units because of using some of those principles. So, I think this is a skill that anybody can develop, and everybody should develop, because really technology is changing fast. And if you don't try to get to the most affordable solution, one, you're leaving out a huge part of the world's population in your market, and two, you're going to just be outcompeted. So,
of course, yeah, and I like your thought process on how to make things more affordable, and it is very important to make things affordable for people that are that need that gap. So thank you for that. My next question is, as a public speaker, you've addressed diverse audiences on topics like automation's impact on employment and AI. What key messages do you convey to your listeners, especially students and young professionals?
Well, I think that the key message I'd love for young professionals to take home, it related to the employment question of what's going to happen with AI and employment, is that we are entering a stage where skills in making things, skills in hardware are going to become important again. We went through this whole process in the educational system where we de-emphasized actually building things. I was one of the last generations in my school system that had access to shop classes. After my class had graduated, they started pulling out all the shops and all the auto repair shop and the machine shop and the wood shop. All the shops got taken out of the school and they got replaced with computer labs, and they got replaced with other things, more classrooms. And there was this concept that everyone was going to become an information worker, and that we could outsource all of these other physical skills. And I think what we're seeing with the development of AI is coming for the information workers. AI is going to replace your average office worker. AI is going to replace your mediocre coder. Like there's always going to be room for a super skilled developer. There's always going to be room for a specialized person who knows like whatever their specific specialty is, whether that be medicine or law or engineering. But your average like graduate of a coding boot camp, for instance, is probably going to be replaced with AI coding in the next 3 to 5 years, if not already. So my belief is that the countries that are going to do well and the individuals that are going to do well are the ones who know how to make things again, and really know how to make things at all scales. So I'm a big fan of Neil Gershenfeld's Center for Bits and Atoms Fab Lab systems, because the Fab Labs look at, like the Center for Bits and Atoms in particular, looks at building things from the atomic scale all the way to the meter scale. So you've got equipment in there from scanning electron microscopes all the way to giant CNC machines and water jet cutters. And I think that getting experience with that type of stuff is something that every young professional should consider doing, because it's just going to open up the world of not having to rely on other people to make your dreams a reality. So whatever physical item you can imagine, you'll be able to design and make and build. And the Fab Labs are a good vehicle for this because there are thousands of them across the world, and they are open in their curriculum. There's a course called How to Make Almost Anything that's taught by Dr. Gershenfeld himself over Zoom to people in the Fab Labs. And that I think is really the future of workforce development in the robotics age. Because what we're going to see is we're going to see a lot of jobs making robots. We're going to see a lot of jobs doing things that robots can't do very well yet. Okay, things like being an electrician, being a plumber, being a carpenter. We're going to see fewer and fewer jobs outside of like people with their PhDs doing AI. We're going to see fewer and fewer jobs in computer science. We're going to see fewer and fewer jobs in just kind of general office work. But we're also going to see growth in biotech. The cost of building a wet lab is going lower and lower and lower. And I mean, I saw a DIY PCR machine that cost sub $100. When I was in high school, I did gel electrophoresis and was using PCR machines. The PCR machines must have been like $50,000-$60,000 for a PCR machine. And now you can make them yourself with an Arduino. So I feel like that's where the future is going. The future belongs to the makers. So if you want to be part of that future and you want to really make things, take the courses that give you the hands-on skills, because anybody can be a maker.
Very nice. Yes, I believe that students should be more introduced and willing to go into courses that allow them to better understand AI, because like you said, AI is such a fast evolving concept that people should be more familiar with. And courses will also help with that.
And can I just add a little thing on AI real quick? What we consider to be cutting edge in AI right now is going to be obsolete in a few years. So it's a very fast moving field, and using the tools isn't enough. You need to understand the techniques. You need to understand backpropagation. You need to understand how convolutional neural nets work. You need to understand what liquid neural nets are. And you need to follow the research papers and follow what's coming out in the conferences. Because the paper out of CSAIL, MIT CSAIL, that described liquid neural nets that came out about a year ago now, or maybe a bit more than a year ago. So, pandemic time has my brain a little bit messed up. But anyways, the liquid neural nets paper was really fascinating in that it provided a new approach to doing neural networks that basically liquid neural nets are modeled after C. elegans worms. And instead of saying fixed weights between the neurons, they use differential equations to create variable weights between the different nodes. So the long and short of it is you can end up with 19 node neural network that does as good a job with self-driving cars as 250 million or 500 million parameter LSTM network. So you're able to actually get down to more human interpretable scales. So I really think the age of big AI, of the large language models, the age of big data being required to train those models, the age of huge GPU farms, this is all just a stepping stone. We're going to get to AI that can be trained from sparse example on a Raspberry Pi in 5 to 10 years. And I don't think our systems are ready for that. But if you want to be part of that, you really need to read the papers. You really need to be studying. You need to have good grasp of your mathematics, and you need to be able to actually do the work in AI and not just say use ChatGPT and be a prompt engineer. Prompt engineering is not going to exist as a job in 5 years.
Of course. Yes. Thank you for that.
No problem. Sorry for the digression there.
No worries. That was very nice insight. My next question is, you've been involved in disaster response efforts. How is technology, particularly robots and AI, changing the way we respond to and recover from natural disasters?
Well, I mean, I was just at TechCrunch, and I saw a company that was working on breath detection from 100-meter distances. Okay. So they would be able to detect in rubble if somebody was trapped under the rubble and breathing during a disaster. Um, Advances like that seem like science fiction are becoming a reality. And I think that's going to fundamentally change how we react to disasters. I had mentioned the drone scanning buildings for safety. Like that's going to fundamentally change how quickly we recover from disasters. I think the other area that I'm really hopeful about is 3D printed and earth bag housing. We had a huge problem after the Haiti earthquake in dealing with housing. There's not enough housing that was built to deal with the number of people who were displaced. And you had tens of thousands of people staying in IDP camps for years. And that's a common problem in IDP camps, where people get stuck in them for years to decades. They live their lives in IDP camps or even refugee camps as well. So thinking about how we can improve our systems so that people get to places where they have access to title to build on land is one thing. And then thinking about how we can efficiently and quickly build structures is another. And I think the robotics is going to help with the second problem of how we efficiently and quickly build structures. So.
Perfect. Nice. Okay, so my next question is, could you discuss your role as the CEO of Avendly Inc., a robotics company for bars and restaurants? And also, what are some innovations enhancing the hospitality industry?
Yeah, so I mean, Avendly is an interesting little company that is really trying to bootstrap things from the ground up, and I think the thing that's really interesting and take away from the approach that we've taken is that previously hardware has required a whole lot of venture capital to make a hardware company. And what we've been trying to show is that if you have access to the tools, if you can build your own CNC machines or purchase base level CNC machines and then modify them, if you have your 3D printers, if you have your vinyl cutter, if you have your just basic shop space, and you have the experience building things, robotics doesn't have to be capital intensive. I mean, yes, there is a capital expense in buying parts, but if you're applying the design for extreme affordability principles and you have the space to actually build stuff, you don't need millions of dollars. And it's a similar sort of thing that happened. I mean, I was part of a startup in the .com era in the early 2000s. And back then, if you want to have a website, you had to buy a server. Okay? And you'd have racks of servers. And you'd have your own infrastructure for like hosting your mail and your website and whatever. All that's in the cloud now, and you can get it for like pennies on the dollar. And I feel like the same thing's happening with hardware, in that you can start to build hardware for very, very little. And that's something that's really exciting to me. And then in terms of just innovations in the hospitality area, I think that Chipotle Next Ventures is really pushing the envelope of where you're going to see robots. So they're building their own equivalent to Spice, which is a company that was out of Boston that got acquired by Sweetgreen that made robotic kitchens. Chipotle is going to be a robotic kitchen in the not too distant future. So you're going to go into, and the great thing about corporate entities taking advantage of this new technology is that they're going to be able to deploy it at scale. So you're going to be going into Chipotle in 5 years from now, and you're going to see robots everywhere. And they're going to have the same robots at every Chipotle. So when people come in, they get trained on the robots. It's going to be exactly the same. There's going to be standardization. And I think that's a really interesting change that's going to help deal with the labor shortages that are happening in the service sector. Because again, part of this demographic shift that's going to happen is more jobs are going to open up that are higher paying as boomers retire. And then fewer people are going to want to enter the lower paying service sector work. And the push to automate the service sector work is going to be something that no company is going to be able to resist because the technology is going to be there. So if McDonald's can buy a machine for $5,000 that replaces a worker that costs them $15 an hour, they will do that. So just because the machine, especially if it's got a low maintenance cycle and it doesn't use a lot of electricity, like that's a question of corporate efficiency that will be a driving force in the future. So overall, I think you're going to see more robots in hospitality. That's the long and short of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about because, like, personally, and a lot of people go to Chipotle and expect to see a face behind the counter. But it's important to think about, like, in the future, like you said, like 5 years or so, we will be more likely to see like robots in restaurants like those helping out with serving and stuff.
And you still will see a person. I'm pretty sure they'll keep the human element, but that person may be just one person instead of five. Mm-hmm. So I think you're gonna see big changes coming as robots enter more unstructured environments and move away from factories and warehouses.
Of course. Great. So my next question is, you've led TED and Echoing Green Fellowships and have been a speaker at prestigious events. What are your most memorable experiences or a talk that had a significant impact on you and why?
Oh, my most memorable experience was at the Economist World Gala in Greece. I was on a panel about robotics with Sophia the robot. So I was speaking on a panel with a robot, and I was very frustrated because it was all artifice. Like it was before ChatGPT, so like the large language model was pretty weak. It was using something called BERT, and it was basically like half canned responses, half large language model output, and it was using basic phrase spotting, so it'd repeat the same thing every once in a while. So like the same answer would come up. And I was just terribly unimpressed. And after the event, though, they let people on stage to talk to the speakers. And we had about 10 people lined up to talk to the speakers. And then there was a line to take selfies with Sophia. It was like 150 people deep. Like everybody wanted a selfie with Sophia. And it just really made me realize that like we've got something in our hearts for these automatons, especially when they start to look like us.
Yeah.
So that is something that on the moral side we have to be very careful of, because there's a huge moral hazard of us anthropomorphizing the robot. And you can see it already with people like talking about how like wasn't llama. What was the Google employee? There's an internal project at Google, and a Google employee was convinced it was conscious. And like that was an example of the kind of anthropomorphic feelings that we can start to ascribe to these automata. And I think that that was a big lesson for me, and definitely my most memorable talk.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting how you brought up that there were more people wanting to take a picture with the robot than actually learn about the robot itself.
Yeah.
And I think that it should be the other way around, because to better know about AI and how fastly it's evolving, you should know about the roots of it. So that was very interesting. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
My last and final question for you is, you've worked extensively in the fields of robotics and AI. You've also been a public speaker at TED Global, where discussions on emerging technologies often include societal concern about AI. Is the societal concern about AI apocalypse merely just hype for movies, or is it a genuine concern?
So I gave a lecture at the TED Summit on AI ethics. And one of the things I polled the room about was how many people were concerned about we watched the Slaughterbots movie. I don't know if anybody's seen Slaughterbots. It's a short little clip that was put out by the Future of Life Institute about lethal autonomous weapon systems. And about half the room, to my surprise, was pretty blasé about the potential for dangerous lethal autonomous weapon systems to be really widespread in their use, and for there to be an arms race in lethal autonomous weapon systems. And unfortunately, I think we're at a stage where we're seeing the early stages of that arms race. And just to understand the end of that arms race, there was a DARPA dogfight challenge called the Alpha Dogfight Challenge, where they interviewed pilots who were in simulation against AI opponents. And the quote that came out of that was that the AI's targeting capability was superhuman. And that is what's happening with all weaponry right now. Like the Air Force has the Valkyrie program, where they're making co-pilots that are artificially intelligent co-pilots that work with humans. There is a lot of work being done on autonomous sniper stations. There's a lot of work being done on autonomous other lethal autonomous weapon systems, and they are going to be faster than us. They're going to be able to deal with more information than us. They're going to be able to deal with more distraction than we can deal with. We're not going to be able to keep up. We are going to be fundamentally outpaced. And in that world, we need to be very, very careful about what systems we let out en masse into the world, and what systems we regulate, and what systems we outright ban. And I think that the time is now to start talking about the ban on lethal autonomous weapon systems. The time was 5 years ago, to be frank, but lethal autonomous weapon systems are going to be prolific and more dangerous than landmines, more dangerous potentially than weapons of mass destruction. And so, due to their innate ability to be accessed by just about anybody, like if you want to make a nuclear weapon, you're going to need nuclear material. Like that's kind of hard to get for most people. But most people can get steppers and servos and propellers and carbon fiber and make tons of drones. So I think there's a huge effort to be done in arms control on robotic weaponry, and I think in terms of like a true apocalypse where AI becomes sentient and goes all Terminator on us. I think if we can control the spread of autonomous lethal weaponry, we can control that outcome, at least for another few decades. But if we don't put controls on that, if we let it just be developed the way we let cybersecurity be an afterthought on the internet, we're in for a world of trouble. And I think it's trouble that especially your generation needs to take seriously, because I personally would not wish upon anybody to ever be drafted into a war against robots. Because it's not a war you're going to win. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's always interesting to hear different people's opinions on this question, because this is a very, it sounds like it's impossible, but it could be a concern. So thank you for your insightful thoughts.
Yeah, no problem. And just to give one more example, I gave a talk to some folks at Yale, and it was a conference of DoD type folks, and I was talking about sniper stations being created by insurgents, and like how easy it would be to create these systems using AI and robotics. And literally a year later, the exact type of systems I was talking about were in the news. So I mean, even though this stuff seems like science fiction, it's happening. So yeah.
That's awesome. But that brings us to the conclusion of this episode. Thank you, Mr. Haas, for taking on this enlightening journey through the realms of robotics, AI, and humanitarian innovation. We explored the power of technology and AI in reshaping industries, enhancing lives, and addressing complex challenges. Your insights have shed light on the intersection of ethics and AI, the remarkable potential of social robotics for the elderly, and the profound impact of design for extreme affordability. From your work, it is very clear that it's not just about technology, it is also about harnessing it responsibly for the greater good. Also, thank you for the valuable tips and advice for inspiring engineers and technologists on how to stay ahead of fields like robotics and AI. It was great to hear about your experiences from being a public speaker. Before we sign off, Mr. Haas, do you have any final thoughts for our audience or extra advice for our high school community?
I would just say keep studying. Always be open to learning, because things are going to change so rapidly over the next 50 years. It's going to take constant education to keep up. So, Good luck.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Mr. Haas, for joining me today. It's been an absolute privilege to have you on my show. With that, we wrap up this episode of AI Trends with Ash. I will see you all in my next episode. Until then, stay curious. Bye.